Hey everybody, I'm doing a quick AMA today, so if you've got any questions, go ahead and drop them. Until then, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so question number one, give me just a second to position this. What are effective, let me start that over. Question number one. What are effective techniques for editing out audible breaths from speech recordings without sounding broken? What I've found is that breaths are more than just sounds we want to cut out. They're part of our normal speech, and more importantly, part of our normal speech patterns. So trying to just cut them out by themselves is going to make things sound broken. So what I find helps best is to just mute them or turn them down in volume. That way we still have the same speech pattern. We still have those pauses where we stop to breathe, but we're not making a sound broken by shortening that up. Breaths are extremely important when it comes to processing what we hear. Without those breaths, our brain doesn't have any time to process. If you've ever watched any kind of a short, you know what I'm talking about. There's just so much talking, there's no breaks in it. You can't really process that information nearly as well. And that compounds the longer the clip is. So a 2-minute clip, you might be able to process what's said. But if it's a 20-minute podcast or a 60-minute podcast, it becomes a lot tougher for us to process. So that's what I do. For the most part, I don't even worry about editing breaths unless they're just really loud and obvious, because the other thing to really keep in mind is the brain is very adept at blocking out breathing as we go. If you've ever paid attention, you'll hear breathing on music. When singers sing, it's common to hear the breathing because they don't cut a lot of that out. You can hear breathing on TV shows and movies. Our brains are remarkably adept at blocking out breathing sounds when we're focused on anything else. So when we're editing, we might be hyper-focused on the breath sounds. But for someone just listening, if you're telling something engaging, the brain's tuning out most of those breaths unless they're really obvious. So, next question. And again, if any of you have questions you want answered, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Next question. Are there affordable or free programs that can train to recognize and remove specific sound artifacts like mic clicks? So, I'm not aware of anything that you can really train. Even RX, you can't really train on clicks. RX is better suited for trying to train it on noises. And I know clicks can be looked at as noises, but I haven't had luck trying to train RX to remove something like a click. For stuff like mic clicks, the best thing I've actually found is Audible's Smart Gate. It does a really good job of gating out any non-verbal sounds. It may not be the best at removing, what's the best way to put it? Like mouse clicks, it does really well with. It might not remove different types of mouth noises, but anything where you've got like a clicking mouse, typing, it does really well at that, provided that it's not occurring while you're speaking. Nothing's going to do too well when it overlaps with speech. But I'm not aware of anything that's available for free that would be able to address that specific type of issue. Just trying to think what else there is. Yeah, my turn 2 would be RX or Soundable SmartGate for that kind of an issue. Let me hide this real quick. Ever dealt with someone who makes a whistling sound as they speak? How can this be remedied in both post and in live situations? That's not one that I've run into before. Let's see, what could we do in post for that? I think the best thing would be maybe some EQ, or maybe that's something where RX would be good for trying to train it on that specific sound. You might also have some luck with de-essing. A lot of it will depend on what frequency range that sound is coming in at and how consistent it is. In a live situation, that's going to be probably a little bit tougher to handle because that is a speech issue. It's not something we can easily EQ out in a live setting without damaging the rest of the audio frequencies. Trying to think what else we might be able to do. Without hearing the exact issue, it's really hard for me to guess, but my instinct would be some combination of RX. RX probably has some kind of module that could help with that to some degree. EQ, maybe a dynamic EQ could help, sort of like the way we use de-essers. A de-esser is a dynamic EQ for the most part. Once it crosses a threshold, it reduces that frequency range however much you set it to. That might be my first try if RX isn't able to do it. And you could probably set up, I don't know if you could set up a dynamic EQ live. If you have the option, you could probably try that live. But like I said, live's going to be a little more problematic than in post. But thanks, Danny, for the question. And if you've got any follow-ups, definitely let me know. Moving on. How do I eliminate echo when using two microphones in OBS with an SSL2 interface? So here we get into that question of what exactly is meant by echo. And this is a little pet peeve of mine because so many people misuse the term echo when it comes to describing stuff in podcasting. It's difficult to know what you're talking about because an echo is, think about yelling across a canyon and you hear yourself echo, echo, echo. That's actually what echo is. What we deal with most of the time, and what I'm probably assuming this person's asking about, is reverb. When you get two microphones in one space, you're doubling up on everything that's being recorded in that room. You have two mics recording the same sounds. the same reverb, the same noise floor, so it's going to be doubled. When it comes to the voice, the mic closest to the voice is going to sound louder. The other mic that's further away from the voice is going to still record that voice, but it's going to be quieter because the voice is further away from the mic. So a mic bleed is, there's no avoiding that when we're recording in person with two mics. We just can't. Mics are inherently not smart devices. They're like our ears. We're going to hear whatever happens in a space. We can't not hear what happens. Mics are the same way. They're going to hear everything in that space. So each additional mic you add in is going to amplify all of the imperfections in the space. And whenever you get crosstalk, two people talking at the same time, it becomes nearly impossible to try to separate those because both mics are going to have both people talking at the same time. So, especially if you're someone who has come from recording remotely where those types of things aren't an issue, recording in person becomes a much different experience. It just means we have to approach things differently. And when I have clients who record in person, the first step I do is go through and cut out all of the places where they're not talking. That's going to chop out most of that reverb, most of that, the secondary voice in the mic. It's going to make things a lot cleaner sounding. And that's actually my first step when I'm editing anything, is to just cut out everything where the person isn't talking, because no one needs that background noise or anything else when someone else is talking. We don't need to hear chairs squeak, people typing or tapping on their desk as the other person talks. We just don't need that. So, best advice is use dynamic mics. Try to position yourself so you're facing each other and the mics, the other person is in the null area or the back side of the mic. That's going to help a little bit. The further away the two of you are is going to help. But for the most part, it's something you're going to be dealing with in post-production when you edit. Like I said, just chop it out. What I've found is there's two approaches to cutting out kind of the silent parts when someone isn't speaking. You can use a trim silence, cut silence, some kind of phrasing like that in your DAW. I'm not sure if Descript and Riverside have options like that or not, but most DAWs do. If your DAW doesn't, like mine, Hindenburg, they seem to think that that's not an important tool because people will misuse it or something. So I have to go in and cut it out manually. What I found makes it pretty easy is to do it before I edit. I'll zoom in pretty tightly and just go through and cut out the big chunks really quickly. I can do like a 2-person 45-minute interview, cut all of that out in probably 3 or 4 minutes. And I do have a video somewhere on my channel that walks through that process. Give me just a second. I've been dealing with Riverside's tech support. Sorry about that. Let's move on. Would a condenser mic with a cardioid polar pattern be a bad pick for a beginner podcast setup? Honestly, a condenser with any polar pattern is not my first choice for a beginner podcast setup. The reason for that is condenser mics are extremely sensitive. That means any sounds, usually inside and even outside of your recording space, are going to be picked up by it. Dynamic mics, they're less sensitive. And because they're less sensitive, they're not going to pick up or magnify those imperfections nearly as much. So if you record in a noisy space, if you're in a room that doesn't have good acoustics, like my room is very well treated, so I can use condenser mics like this one here, or Northworks Ethos, because I'm not having to contend with the reverb that poor acoustics bring to the table. So there's a reason why I see so many people who start out with a Yeti and get frustrated with the sound quality and then decide to quote unquote upgrade to a dynamic, and they're so much happier because they are more forgiving of imperfect recording spaces. Condenser mics really do need to be used in an acoustically treated space. Think like a recording studio type environment. If you're recording in a home office and you haven't done any kind of treatment of your acoustics, do yourself a favor and start with a dynamic mic. I've got a couple follow-up questions or comments. I shoot walk and talk style videos with up to 4 people on camera, all recorded to ISO tracks via Tentacle Track e-body packs or Sennheiser wireless mics. I edit in Final Cut Pro and need a workflow to do Dugan-type auto mixing to attenuate mics that are open but inactive speakers. I know there are a couple of plugins that do that type of auto mixing. I'm trying to think what the name of it is. Give me a second to try and look that. I realized I muted myself in the middle of that thought. Let me try to find that plugin real quick, but in Final Cut Pro, I abhor doing any kind of mixing in Final Cut Pro. Give me a second to see if I can quickly find that plugin for you. I'm not able to find the one I'm thinking of, at least not quickly. It looks like Waves has an auto mixer plugin. The one I'm thinking of, okay, I just found it. WT Auto Mixer. That's another one. I know Curtis Judd did a video on that, I think. I tried it out. I could, but granted, this was just a 2-person interview. I didn't get the best results with it. I'm trying to think. It could have just been me not understanding how it works, but I couldn't get it to work the way I wanted it to. But yeah, for four-person talking or walk and talk style videos, I can see why you'd want something like that. And yeah, my best advice is check out WT Auto Mixer and check out the Waves Auto Mixer plugin. Chances are you can get one of those to work for your use. Let's make sure I didn't miss any other comments. Okay, the best workaround would probably be to use 4 wireless mics fed into sound devices mix pre with the optional auto mix module. Yeah, I think if you've got the budget to do that, that would probably be the best way to do it because you're doing that in hardware. I would think the software should be able to do it. And like I said, when I tried WT Auto Mixer, I couldn't get it to work the way I thought it should. But granted, I didn't put a whole lot of time into it because some of the other stuff that it promised just wasn't working the way I wanted it to. I felt like I could get better results manually, but most of the stuff I'm doing is just 2-person in studio type setups. So definitely a little bit different than what you're doing, Danny. Okay, so I'll see if you have any other follow-ups on that. But while I wait, I'll go ahead and return to the questions. Let's see, we did that one. Is the difference between dynamic and condenser microphones significant for podcasting? And I threw this one in here because it's more or less related to the last question about choosing a condenser mic as a starter podcaster. And I kind of went into some of this, but there are differences between the 2 types of mics. Dynamic mics are more forgiving. Condenser mics act kind of like a magnifying glass. Both still need to be positioned pretty close to the mouth. Dynamic mics need to be closer, usually 2 to 3 inches, maybe up to 4 inches if you've got a louder voice. Condenser mics can be placed a little bit further away because they are more sensitive. That doesn't mean you can just set them on your desk 3 feet away from you. Case in point about the sensitivity, a plane just flew by. Chances are you probably heard that. With a dynamic mic, it probably wouldn't have picked that up because it's so close to my mouth that we're getting a much higher percentage of my voice compared to any other background sounds. More or less similar to signal to noise ratio. If my voice is the signal and background noise is the noise, we want the highest signal to noise ratio to get the cleanest recordings. And that's where dynamic mics really win out. Condenser mics due to that sensitivity, you're always going to get more of your recording space in the recordings. The further away the mic is, even when you have good acoustics, you're still going to sound further away. And it's just not going to sound nearly as good as you can get with a dynamic. My advice is to always stick with the dynamic until you've put some effort into making your space sound good. Then that opens up your world to any kind of mic you want. You're not just relegated to dynamic mics. But really, for podcasting, you don't need anything more than a dynamic mic. You don't even really need anything beyond a USB mic. In my opinion, the best equipment is the simplest to use. Whatever allows you to get up and recording the fastest with the least amount of frustrations. I can tell you from having a very complicated setup, there's nothing worse than wanting to record and something not working and having to spend time trying to troubleshoot, figure out, well, why isn't this working? Why am I not getting signal into Ecamm or into Riverside or wherever I'm recording? Keep things as simple as possible. And for podcasting, we don't need to go nuts. The equipment isn't going to make you sound that much better. These days, the USB mics have gotten pretty good, and no one's going to stop listening if you're using a good sounding USB mic. They just aren't. What are the disadvantages of recording two USB mics on two different laptops for a podcast? Right off the top of my head, I wouldn't even call it a disadvantage. I guess things to be aware of is when you're recording on two different laptops. And this would apply whether you're using two different recorders, laptops. Whenever you're recording to two different devices at the same time, unless you're using some kind of a timecode sync device like Danny was talking about earlier, you're going to have two recordings that they'll probably sync up, but it's going to require a little bit of effort on your end to get them lined up. Because you didn't say if you're recording video or not. If you're doing video, most NLEs like Final Cut, DaVinci, Premiere, they'll be able to take those two audio signals and sync them up for you. If you're working in a DAW, I don't think Descript or Riverside sync up audio that's recorded with different start and end times. So I don't think those will help. But I guess it's the same thing for DAWs. I'm not aware of a DAW that auto syncs audio for you. So that's going to probably be the biggest disadvantage if you're doing audio only. If you're using something like Riverside or Descript to record, then you're not going to have any issues because that platform will start the recordings on both computers at the same time, eliminating any kind of syncing issues. I'm trying to think. The other issue is maybe not an issue, but I talked about it earlier. The thing to be aware of is when you're recording two people in the same space, is you're going to have mic bleed. Mic bleed, especially if you're using condenser mics is going to be more apparent. It generally requires a little more work in post-production to clean things up so that, let's say, somebody's talking and the other person sneezes, to try to minimize the sound of that sneeze. If both mics are open all the time, that sneeze is going to get doubled and be more in your face than if you can cut that out on the other mic. But if you're, let's say, using Audacity to record 2 different mics on those 2 different laptops, I'd probably advise looking into something like Zoom. Not something like Zoom's P2 is the only thing on the market that I'm aware of that allows you to connect 2 USB mics to a single laptop and record as if you were using XLR mics in an audio interface. That would solve the problem of syncing up, because now you can use one laptop to record those 2 USB mics starting at the same time. And Danny has a comment about WT Auto Mixer. It's been acquired by Shure. Not surprising. Shure has been doing auto mixing in corporate facilities for many decades. I haven't looked at the WT Auto Mixer website in a while, but when I tested it out, Shure had acquired the company almost a year before, and there hadn't been any updates to the software, so I don't know if Shure is going to continue updating and maintaining that software, or if they bought it for the underlying technology and are going to sunset it at some point in the future. That's probably my biggest hesitation with WT Auto Mixer, not knowing if it's going to have a future or not. Just kind of like when Meta bought, I can't remember, Meta bought some plugin suite that a lot of people were using and just completely killed it off. That's always my concern when a company buys something and that company, like in the case of Shure isn't known for building and releasing plugins. So I do wonder if there's a long life there. Sorry for the background noise. We've got landscapers walking by. And then Danny said, Apogee actually packages a kit with 4 USB hype mics and a custom travel case. Are those... Do they have a way of connecting those to a single computer? Because I know Rode has found a way to allow people to connect more than one of their USB mics to a computer. I didn't even know that Apogee was making mics. I'll have to look into that. But Danny, if you've got any info, feel free to share it. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and look that up on my own outside of this stream. Okay, we did that one. How can remote podcast co-hosts ensure good audio quality and a smooth recording experience? Okay, there's a couple of ways I can take this. Remote podcast co-hosts. So I'm going to assume that you are co-hosting with another person who is remote. And to get good audio quality and smooth recording experience, I mean, first and foremost, use some kind of a podcast recording platform app that records locally. Something like Riverside, Descript, StreamYard, Zencaster, Boomcaster, any of those are going to give you good audio quality because you're removing internet connection from the equation. That's why Zoom recordings can be so rough, because you're recording to the internet. The quality is really dictated by the strength of the internet connection, and if there's any kind of a dropout, you have those audio and video glitches, dropouts, freezes. With local recording, you don't get that. Everything is recorded on your computer, so you're going to get the highest quality that way. The other thing to really think about is when it comes to recording quality, all of that starts before you even hit the record button. Making sure you have the mics positioned right, that you have good mic technique, that you aren't talking away from the mic and moving all around. Understanding how to get the best recordings are going to help you get the best audio quality. And it doesn't take a whole lot to do. Just know that you need to get the mic really close to your mouth. If you're using something like a Samsung Q2U or a Yeti or something that has a tiny little desktop stand, you need to get that higher up. You need to get it closer to your mouth. Put some books or boxes under it to raise it up. If you have a standing desk, adjust it, raise it up so the mic is real close to your mouth. That's the biggest key to getting good quality recordings. Get the mic close to your mouth. That's basically it. If someone's using a laptop, the same rules apply. Raise it up and get it close to the person's mouth. I did the example earlier. Let me do it again. If you put the mic further away, you're going to sound farther away. You're not going to get that real professional sound. And if you don't have good sounding acoustics, the further away you have the mic, the more you're going to mix in the reverberant sound of your space. When it comes to ensuring good audio quality and a smooth recording experience with remote guests, that adds a little bit more to the equation, because you need to be able to help them troubleshoot any kind of tech problems. You need to be able to help guide them through getting their equipment set up to get the best recording you can. And we don't want to be really nitpicky about everything. We don't want to frustrate the guest, because nothing derails a good conversation like getting frustrated right before you start. If you have the ability to do so, try to schedule a call like the day before to walk them through setting everything up, testing everything out, just to make sure there's no unseen issues, to make sure their internet connection is solid enough, all of those things. Let's see what else. I mean, try to recommend they use headphones, earbuds, anything they can put in their ears, on their ears, so that they're not listening to the audio from their speakers. Because nothing kills audio like echo cancellation does. So when people ask me, what's the most important thing to good recording quality when we're recording remotely, they look at me weird when I tell them headphones. Headphones make the biggest difference because you don't have to use echo cancellation. The mic is the next thing. And if you can, try to require guests to already have an actual microphone if you want them on your show, because it's your show. You can control who you have on, and if you want the best quality recordings, you want to make sure everybody who comes on your show has a mic. If it's really important and you have the budget, I've worked with some corporate shows where they will either send out a loaner mic to their guests, or they'll just ship them a cheap mic like a Samson Q2U or Audio-Technica ATR 2100X, and just ship them out to them. It depends what your budget is, what you want for kind of a baseline audio quality. Some people are going to be okay having guests with laptops or phone mics. It's up to you. I do not recommend, though, anybody using AirPods for the mic, because AirPods are hands down the worst sounding mic devices I've used or had the experience of editing and recording with. They just don't sound good. Well, I guess that goes for any kind of Bluetooth device. Bluetooth mics, they're just bad. Try to stay away from those. But other than that, it's my best advice, having engineered hundreds of remote sessions for clients. Have a cheat sheet if you're not super familiar with how to set up Macs and PCs for mics and audio input and output devices. The more you can help your guests set stuff up and troubleshoot, the more you take that anxiety off of them. And look, I'm not a PC user. I've been on Macs for 25 years or so, but I have no problems helping PC users get set up because I do have basically a cheat sheet that has all of the different places we'd need to go to set up or check settings and all of that stuff. Troubleshooting is probably the biggest thing that is important when you're working with remote guests, because, like I said, nothing derails a conversation more than getting frustrated before it even starts. Danny says, doubling the distance to the mic, an increase from 4 inches to 8 inches, for example, results in 4 times increase of noise to signal. Exactly. The voice, relatively speaking, is a very quiet instrument. It needs to be really close to mics to get the best results. And I realize that I missed an earlier comment. Mic position is the first order of mixing, signal versus noise. The laws of physics can't be sidestepped. Everyone working in audio must understand the inverse square law, which is doubling the distance to the mic, an increase from 4 inches to 8 inches, for example, results in 4 times increase of noise to signal. Danny, thank you. That's much more technical than I would be able to describe it, but it's very true. We need to, whenever we are the person responsible for recording other people, we are the audio engineer. Whether we signed up for that or not, whether we want to be or not. The person who presses record, the person who's running the show, is going to be the audio engineer. So the more you understand the basics of mic positioning, the more it's going to help with your audio quality. And that actually does tie into what I was talking about with good audio recordings when recording remotely. A lot of podcasters just want to jump in and hit record. They'll oftentimes be hesitant to speak up to others and say, hey, could you move the mic closer to you? Or let's say someone's using corded earbuds. Hold that cable away from the body so that it's not rubbing against clothing. That makes a huge difference. But the biggest thing is get the mic close to the mouth. You don't want people talking directly into the mic because that captures all of the stuff. And sorry in case there were any plosives there, but talking directly into the mic increases plosives. If you're someone like me with mouth noise, it's going to capture more of that. If you put it right in front of your mouth and you're talking into it, you're going to be breathing right into it. So the best position for a mic is off to the side, angled towards the corner of your mouth. That way you're talking kind of past it instead of directly into it. And then Danny simplifies his explanation. Doubling the mic distance quadruples the noise. So that's an easy thing to think about. And the more noise you have in your space, whether it's, and it does depend to a degree on the type of mic you're using. A condenser mic, you're going to be able to hear stuff outside your space. Like you probably heard the landscapers or the jet fly overhead. Dynamic mics aren't going to pick up nearly as much, but you're still going to be quadrupling the noise, regardless of the type of mic you're using. So, bottom line, get that mic close to the mouth. It's going to sound better. But do pay attention because a lot of mics have proximity effect. Proximity effect means when, as I bump my glasses into the mic, but when you get really close to the mic and you're talking into it, you're going to hear a little more thickness, a little more low end. Sometimes that will sound good, sometimes it doesn't. You'll just have to test it out and make sure that you're not too close if that proximity effect doesn't sound good on your voice. And in case anybody else out there has questions, please drop them in because I'm hitting the last pre-asked question. Okay. Do we need... I don't know why I completely botched that up. Do we need a mixer and headphones for each person for multi-person podcasting? If you go by what people say online, they're going to say yes, everybody should be wearing headphones. I don't personally agree with that. I think it's good to have someone use headphones to check everybody's levels. But I know that for me personally, I do better when I don't have headphones on. I can hear myself speak better. I can hear the volume of my voice. I can control things a lot better than when I have headphones on. The only reason I hear people say wear headphones is so you can tell if you're moving off mic or if there's any audio problems. But the vast majority of audio problems that happen, you're not going to hear with headphones. I see a lot of people talk about, well, I was recording and something happened and it switched from my real mic to my laptop mic. You're not going to hear that with headphones on. But really, that's probably not an issue if we're using a mixer. Nice. I hope they're talking about a podcast mixer. But yeah, in person, using some kind of mixer that you're probably recording to, each person doesn't need to be wearing headphones. You're all in the same space. You can hear each other. Headphones they're not adding anything other than making it a little tougher for people to hear themselves. So I think part of it is You see shows like Joe Rogan where everybody's wearing headphones. So people mimic that and must think there's a reason they do that. Maybe they do. I don't know. My experience is everybody's different, but I've found that most people do better when they don't have headphones on. It makes it feel more natural, more like a real conversation with people in the same space. And when we're recording people in the same space, that's the experience we want to have. Putting headphones on kind of distances yourself from that perception. It just, at least for me, it does. I'd be curious to see what other people think about headphones, but my answer to this is you don't need to use headphones. You can use them if you want. You can make it voluntary for the people participating. There's really not a right or a wrong answer here. It's all personal preference, and that's what it comes down to for a lot of these things. I could be using headphones right now. If I were, I could hear the proximity effect of the mic as I got close. I know I'm not clipping, so I don't need to worry about that. So I don't wear headphones when I do these. I like being able to hear myself better as someone who doesn't have a whole lot of prosody in my voice. It really does help and make a big difference being able to hear myself in real time. With headphones, I have to turn them up too high and it still never sounds quite right. Headphones get used to prevent feedback when a remote participant would otherwise be amplified in the presence of other participants. Yeah, if there's any kind of remote person, absolutely, everybody needs to be wearing headphones. I talked about that earlier. Echo cancellation just destroys audio. You get feedback, and it's just not a... That's one hard and fast rule I have. If you're doing anything with a remote participant, everyone needs headphones. That's it. Let me hide this question. And we've got Matthew Bliss. Hey, Matt. Nice seeing you. Tell us what the legit difference is between 41K and 48K sample rate. I see some preferences for either, but functionally, I don't think it matters much. What do you think? I think I need some water first. The only time 44.1 and 48 really matter is when you're doing video. One is not going to sound better than the other. We've been using 44.1 for CD playback since CDs were created. That's more than enough. We're not getting more higher quality audio using 48K. The only reason it matters, like I said, is when it comes to video. 48K syncs up to all of the different frame rates. 44.1, you're going to get some sync issues with audio drift at certain frames per second settings. That's really the only difference. 48K, you're taking up more disk space per minute of recording. You're not getting much benefit, if any, audible benefit from that. You might see some benefit from doing 96K, but that's only like if you're using plugins, but a lot of plugins these days upsample. But if you're doing music, sure, you can do 96. Most people aren't probably, let me say that again. Most people aren't going to hear a difference, and it really kind of comes down to how easy it is to process. And I think recording at higher sample rates, you can use a gentler not you, the audio interface can use gentler low-pass filters when they're doing their 80 conversion. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, they can use a gentler one, so you get slightly cleaner audio when you're coming up to those really high frequencies. That's the only real technical difference of going up higher, but between 44.1 and 48K, there's going to be such a negligible difference. And especially for podcasting, you're putting it out there as MP3 as it is, it's not going to matter. If you're doing video, go 48K. If you're doing audio only, do 44.1. Or if you just want to have everything standard, just go with 48. You can't go wrong with 48. That's my advice there. Does anyone else have any questions before I wrap this up? Thank you. I'm not sure when I got muted, but yeah, Matt, if you've got any ideas for our stream next week, let me know. What I was saying is that I try to do these AMA live streams every so often because I end up with a collection of questions I see that I collect from places online that get submitted in my community, that people email me, and it's a good way to answer these questions because a lot of them are things I see asked over and over because there's not good source of... The internet is full of conflicting information, some of it good, some of it bad. So, yeah, that's why I do the AMAs, and it's always good when I have people like Matthew and Danny. It is Danny, right? Yeah. I'm terrible with names, so I always want to verify I've got the right names. I love answering your guys' questions. That's why I do this. That's why I started the community, the YouTube channel, just to be able to help people. There's not enough places people can go to ask questions about this stuff other than going into Reddit or Facebook, where you get a lot of people, what mic should I use? Well, you should use a Yeti because that's what I use, and I think everything sounds good. Then you listen to that person's podcast and go, yeah, it could sound better. So a lot of people recommend only what they use and haven't used anything else. So I've used a lot of mics. I've been doing this for a while, so try to share my advice, my experience. And I just love talking shop with people as well. But thanks everybody for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.